Tashi Dilek, and welcome everyone to the two-day lecture series on what do China's pre-1949 official authoritative documents say about Beijing's claim of historic sovereignty over Tibet by Professor Hon-Shiang Lau, former professor, Oklahoma State University, and this lecture will be chaired by Professor Ravi Prasad Narayan, Associate Professor, Jawaharlal Nehru University. May I request both the chair and the speaker and our director to take their respective seat on the dais. To welcome our speaker and chair for the session in a Tibetan way, may I request our director to kindly offer a khadak to both our speaker and chairperson. Thank you, Gisela. Before we begin the actual session, I would like to briefly introduce you about Tibet House and its activities. Tibet House, the culture center of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, was founded in 1965 by His Holiness the Dalai Lama to preserve and disseminate the unique cultural heritage of Tibet and to provide a center for Tibetan and Buddhist studies. From 1959 onwards, Tibetans have been fleeing from the political upheavals in their homeland, traveling the difficult paths across the Himalayas into India. Many brought with them precious objects and books of religious and cultural significance. These formed the seat of our museum and the library. Tibet House has a museum of valuable Tibetan art and artifacts, as well as a library with volumes of manuscripts and books, and a conference hall where regular Buddhist philosophy classes, lectures, and seminars are organized. His Holiness the Dalai Lama always emphasizes universal interdependence and the need to develop a sense of harmony and compassion as the antidote to suffering. His vision has a profound effect on the activities of Tibet House. The activities of the center reach beyond the circle of Tibetologists and Buddhist masters. It integrates laypersons as well as scholars of many disciplines. It hosts lectures, conferences, exhibitions, film screenings, and festivals. These programs focus mainly on Indian and Tibetan Buddhist history, religion, philosophy, art, literature, and culture. As an increasing number of people worldwide get interested in Tibetan studies and Buddhist teachings, the horizons of Tibet House continue to expand. Its mission is not only to preserve the past, but also to explore the contribution Buddhism can make for alleviating global suffering. You can find more details about our programs in the brochures given to you, and you can also subscribe to our mailing list to get weekly updates about our programs. So without taking much time, may I now request our director, Venerable Geshe Doji Damdula, to address the gathering.
Our respected chair, Professor Ravi Prasad Narayanji, and the presenter, the lecturer for this the two-day program. We have Professor Lau. So how all these things unfolded was that 2 years ago, my very dear friend, Mr. the Tsawang Arya, who was the then secretary of the Bureau of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Delhi. He asked me if Tibet House can organize a talk of Dr. Lau, and I said, okay, we organize a talk. And I sat there for the program, and I was so impressed. I thought that this is something which that we all should know. In fact, the Tibetan youngsters, all of us, we know that they are very patriotic, tremendous sense of the love for their nation, and they want to really struggle, fight for the nation. But then, if the question is asked, what is the ground for you to say that Tibet was a free nation? What ground? Okay, we have some very standard responses. But then when I was listening to Professor Lau that time, I was so impressed. This is the fact base. It's amazing, which is all coming from the documents of the Chinese and in the archive of the Chinese government. So then I made a personal request to Professor Lau that please kindly accept our invitation that in a year or two time, we'd like to invite you to give a talk in a very systematic way, a talk. This is so important for the Tibetan youngsters to know, and of course the world audience of the world, experts on the China, they should know. So this is something so precious, and he could feel the gravity of my request, and he so kindly accepted to come to give a talk. So he came all the way from, of course, now he just came from Singapore. Otherwise, he lives in Canada and in Hong Kong. And so this is how we're all together here. And more important than the gathering here is that the Chinese experts on the China, Tibet, India, they should know these facts. This is going to be a very important document for the history of the humanity, for the history of China, Tibet, India, and the world. So in this, I'd like to give you some of my thoughts in brief. One is that I remember His Holiness the Dalai Lama oftentimes saying that those people who are standing for Tibet, we need to keep in mind that they are not pro-Tibetan, they're pro-truth. They are pro-truth. This is so important. So in fact, the point is that we should not mix up the two things, our political agendas and the truth of the history, what the history is. So that we have somebody who's so competent and who is able to really read through the complicated documents of the Chinese ancient documents written in Mandarin and be able to flesh out in the contemporary language, English language. So we are very fortunate. And then in this connection, I'll also like to just give you some ideas, throw to the floor some of my ideas. One is that why all these problems are happening in the world. All these problems. For example, Tibet. You go through the history. Very objectively, we see that so badly annexed by a very powerful nation, and then nobody can say anything stand towards the truth. One. And then, for example, what is happening everywhere in the world, in Hong Kong, and the Doklam, the pass, and just look at all these, we see that all these complications are there. Why? Why these complications are there? This is one question. So, to make it very short, it is an error system, the error in the system. The system developed, say, the ideology. For example, say, just recently, I saw a clip, like a cartoon clip, where it wrote that first is China. No, in Tibet, first Tibet, and then the Uyghur, and then Hong Kong, and then the world. This is what's bound to happen because the ideology, the basic ideology from what we can see, look at the history of China, we see that they believe in the ideology of expansionism. Expansionism, there's no limit. There's no limit. Okay, this is limit. Okay, now we are happy. No. Expansionism is you have to keep growing. So this belief eventually will grow to the world. So this is one point. So this is a system, error in the system. So for this, the world should know, world should be more aware of the truth, what the truth is. in this connection, then I also like to point out to most of us, the people who are a little aware of the scenario of the world today, they know our vulnerability in the greatest of the nations, their vulnerability to the power of the economy is one. They know the facts, but they show a blind eye because of they've been so vulnerable to the power of the economy of another nation. And then another thing is the world. It doesn't matter. So the purpose here is not for any political agenda, but to flesh out the truth. And then on that basis, then finally, for your own benefit, for the benefit of the individual nations and for the world, say how we should be able to see the world, the various nations, countries as interdependent. They are not independent. Independent as, okay, we have nothing to do with you. They are all very closely interdependent into this world, number one. Then not only interdependent in space now, but also in time. To this world, tomorrow, after 10 years, after 100 years, what the world is going to be like, what India is going to be like, what China is going to be like, what America is going to be like, and what all the neighboring countries. This is another thing, in time, not only space, only in time, also in time. This is the next thing. And then in other words, today, how the world leaders, most of the world leaders, how they handle the world is like, say, the fire in a small child's hands. They can burn the house. The world in which we live, they can easily destroy this, not seeing the far consequences. For example, the conference on the climate change and so forth, and who the world leaders are really taking interest in this. This is very clear, like the fire in the child's hand. No, you don't really care about tomorrow of the world after 10 years, 100 years, 1,000 years. They don't really care. This is like not really being able to see the far-ranging consequences. Okay. So therefore, the point here, particularly this gathering, is to flesh out the reality, truth. On this basis, once you know the truth, then how we utilize the truth for your own benefit, for your next generations, for your own country's nation, the benefit. So we should be able to see this truth from this, see if we can extrapolate, if we can extend it further in time, what your nation is going to become like after 10 years, after 100 years, and so forth. Okay, so this whole purpose of our being together here is to flesh out the truth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geshe-la. May I request everyone to put your mobile phone on silent or either switch off or silent. May I now request before I request Professor Ravi Prasad Narayan to continue with the session, I would like to briefly introduce him. Professor Ravi Prasad Narayan has been with Jawaharlal Nehru University since October 2015. His teaching and research interests focus on China, its foreign policy, economic reforms, and pedagogies revolving around explaining China. International relations and theories explaining state behavior motivate his research and publications. At JNU, he has been teaching 3 courses: Research Methods in International Relations, a primer to understand methods of writing dissertations and conducting research relevant to a research university like JNU, Strategies of Economic Development in China, explaining the deep history and processes that have led to China becoming the global destination for investment and internal economic transformation, now expanding outwards in economic and strategic terms, and the course titled The State in Modern China, detailing the modern nation state putting on a veneer over a civilizational state with the Communist Party of China presiding over every segment of politics, economy, and society. He was earlier Associate Research Fellow with the Institute of International Relations, National Chengchi University, Taipei, Taiwan, from 2009 to 2015. Before IIR, he was with the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, New Delhi, from 2003 to 2009. May I now request Professor Narayan to continue with the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. As it is said, Tashi Beleg. And the lady before me has given a profile about what I have been doing. And today the guest of honor is Professor Lau. You must be having his brief CV. And we have with us Professor Lau, who's a Bachelor of Engineering, followed by a master's degree in management. So we have with us, you could say, a technocrat with managerial skills who has been a professor of management science, Oklahoma State University, more than a decade. And then he has also been in Shanghai, in the People's Republic of China, at Shanghai Jiaotong Taxue and also Shanghai Tongji Taxue. Taxue is a term for university. Ta, big, Shui is study. And he is now, you could say, a researcher well known for his attributes at explaining what he's going to talk about today. And before he holds forth, let me also reveal a little bit about the university where I am these days. Yes, it is a research university. And people like me do teach courses on China because my argument has always been that India and China should stop seeing each other as states, because state is a very Westphalian category. India and China are civilizations. And here I have to borrow a phrase, not phrase, a sentence, from a scholar based in Academia Sinica in Taipei, Taiwan, when he was asked to describe the war in 1962 between India and China. What he said was, for more than 2 millennia, India did not invade China and not a single man wearing a uniform crossed the high mountains, while China did the reverse and sent men wearing uniforms over the mountains. And this is something which he regretted, but he was in Taipei, Taiwan. So he was safe to say that with Academia Sinica. And the tribute to Chinese civilization here, especially what I've seen in Taiwan, is respect to education. Academia Sinica, when you go there, when you enter to your left, is a small park which the Chinese call Kungyuan. It's called Hu Shi Kungyuan, named after the academic who had made these statements. So in very many ways, if you look at it, especially in the Taiwanese case, China is, well, the China which they wish to recapture. That's not going to happen. But Professor Lau will explain various aspects when it comes to Tibet and China. My only supposition before he takes over is that I don't see any difference when it comes to Tibet, whether it's Taiwan or China. Because Taiwan, which became Taiwan because of the KMT, the Kuomintang, and the communists on the mainland, Kongzhendang, they have the same view when it comes to Tibet. Tibet is theirs. I agree entirely with Professor Lau. They are expansionist. If that is an ideology which they have, so be it. I leave it at that because the guest of honor is Professor Lau. And Professor Lau, it's all yours now. Sure. Welcome.
Well, good afternoon, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be with you today, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to share my research with you. Let me briefly introduce myself. I received my bachelor's degree in engineering from the University of Singapore and my PhD in business administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And for many years, I was a Regents Professor at Oklahoma State University, and then later on, Chair Professor of Management Science at the City University of Hong Kong. After I retired, I devoted all my time to studying Chinese history and literature. And that explains why I'm standing over here, because you're wondering why is a business professor talking about Chinese history. I retired 9 years ago, and in the past 9 years, I've been doing a full-time job of researching in Chinese history. I do this as my retirement hobby. I want to mention explicitly that I don't get any money for doing this. Whenever I get invitations, the inviting organizations have always been very kind to offer to pay for my airfare and my hotel bills, and I've always insisted that I do not receive any payment. I pay for my own airfare, I pay for my own hotel. The only thing I'll accept would be free meals, okay? If you give me a free lunch, I accept it, okay? But I pay for my own airfare, I pay for my own hotel bills. And the reason is very important. I'm a Chinese, okay? And I don't want the PRC to tell people that I'm doing this, okay? I'm getting money, I'm being paid for the Tibetans, I'm paid for the Indians, I'm paid for the Americans, okay, to do this, okay? I'm doing it just as hobby. So if you want to organize a talk for me, I'll think about it, because every year I set aside part of my income, okay, for doing this, okay? And when my annual budget is depleted, then I'll say I can't come, okay? So if you invite me to come in April when my fund is not depleted, I'll pay for the airfare, I'll pay for everything. As I say, all you have to do is to pay for my lunch. The material that I'm using today is actually from a book that will come out next week, which again, I don't receive any royalty, and all the proceeds of the sale of that book will be donated to Tibetan schools for children. Unfortunately, that book is all in Chinese, okay? The purpose is to address, really, my target audience is Chinese, not to Indians, not to Tibetans. And the title of the book is Tibet Was Never Part of China Since Antiquity. So that's an introduction. The scope of this talk would be, first of all, I'm going to cover some basic concepts. And then after that, a very important part would be to talk about Chinese historiography. And I beg you to be patient with me, because we need to have a solid background of basic Chinese historiography before we can proceed and talk about the Tibet-Chinese sort of the argument, as you would say. But anyway, after that, the primary objective would be, number one, to see whether Tibet was part of China during the Ming Dynasty, and then part B, which will be tomorrow, we'll talk about whether Tibet was independent of China during the Qing Dynasty. So it'll be basically today, we'll talk about the Ming Dynasty, and tomorrow we'll talk about Qing Dynasty, but today we'll also talk a little bit more about basic Chinese historiography. Before I continue, may I ask one question? How many of you can read Chinese? One, two, three. Only three, okay. I really depend on you, because you need to tell me where I go wrong, okay? But seriously, this question is just so debatable and so controversial that you need to check every word, okay? And so call me out. You might say, hey, you're lying. You're translating the Chinese incorrectly. Let the audience know and let me know, okay? Point out immediately. Point out my mistakes, okay? We have actually, I think that there are two people over here that stand out in this room. Myself is the only, I thought I'll be the only Chinese in the room. I think there's another Chinese in the room too. So I really depend on the other Chinese in the room to point out any errors that I'm making, okay? To make sure that when I'm doing the translation, I'm not faking anything. It's just so much fabrication, and it's just so much faking in this field that you have to watch every word, okay? Anyway, so why are we talking about this topic to begin with? Okay, who cares whether Tibet was part of China in ancient time? Okay, we are only interested in the present, right? Well, not really. It's because the PRC insists on talking about history. The PRC justification for refusing to negotiate with the Tibetans is that the Dalai Lama refuses to admit that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. So both sides insist on something that's irreconcilable. And then, of course, the PRC claims that Tibet is being unified, okay, and not invaded. And it's because, well, Tibet has always been part of China. Therefore, the 1950 military action is not an invasion or occupation, but it's a reunification of Tibet into the old motherland. Now, for those of you interested in going into details, the official statement of the PRC, the most official statement, is given by this white paper, which is called Tibet. its ownership and human rights condition, situation, it's White Paper, Information Office of the State Council, or PRC, and of course, you can get it from the internet, both in the Chinese version and the English version. And there are, of course, other subsequent white papers on the same topic, which, of course, if you're interested, you should first look at the PRC's position and how they have sort of stated their arguments. So this is one example of the PRC presents their position, and that's how Chinese children are taught in China. Okay, very unfortunately, the reason why I think in this world we have such irreconcilable differences is because your father tells you one side of the story, and then my father tells me my side of the story, and your father's version is just so different. Actually, it's not very different. It's just totally contradictory. Your father's version is totally different, opposite to my father's version, and we never actually occurred to us that, is there another side of the story? Okay, it never occurred that way, okay? So over here, let's look at what the Chinese teach their own people, okay? So the Minister of United Front, which is the name is Suta, which is this is incidentally the PRC official news website, okay? So stated the following during the National Press Conference. The fundamental political basis for contact and negotiation with the Tibetans is recognizing that Tibet has been an inseparable part of China since antiquity. The Dalai Lama has consistently refused to educate himself seriously and correctly on such a fundamental issue. At the July meeting, the lack of honesty and sincerity of the Dalai Lama's faction has again destroyed the atmosphere of the meeting. Okay? Further, you see that goes on. The Dalai Lama faction repeatedly refused to admit that Tibet has been an inseparable part of China since antiquity. From 2002 to the most recent meeting, we have conferred with the Dalai Lamas, with Dalai. Actually, pardon me, this is the straight quotation, okay? So actually, the Chinese simply call the Dalai Lama Dalai, okay? Which, of course, is very rude to the Tibetans, but I'm just giving you the original version, okay? With Dalai's personal representative 9 times, each time they have indicated that they do not agree that Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. So this is just an example of thousands of similar statements that are taught in schools and whatever. Of course, the implication, of course, is obviously, the Tibetan side is just lying or they're not recognizing the truth. So, but why does the PRC insist on something that's so seemingly obscure and academic? Who cares about history? Well, the reason is this, is that China is a signatory to, first of all, the League of Nations Covenant in 1980, and then the United Nations Charter in 1945. Both documents prohibit future means post-1918, territorial acquisition via conquest, which is very strange. We now actually have a world where all the countries agree actually that all the conquests and all the occupations before 1918 is okay? But after 1918, all these countries got together and they promised that in future, no more conquest, okay? Moreover, of course, the PRC, if anybody who knows anything about the way Chinese people like us were taught when we were children, okay, by our education material, is that we were told endlessly, incessantly, that this is this sorry picture of China being a victim of Japan and the Western colonial powers, how the Chinese were being bullied, okay? And then, of course, we also condemns the powers, the Japanese and then the Western powers for whatever they have done to the other countries, including, of course, India and so forth, okay? And, of course, China is also a permanent member of the UN Security Council. So they cannot say that, oh, I don't want to accept these things, okay? I mean, they are is a permanent member. And so that's the reason why they have to say that the occupation of Tibet is the reunification of an old territory. They cannot say that, oh, in 1950, we just conquered Tibet. See, a lot of patriotic Chinese are aware of that. And so actually, you would talk to a lot of so-called patriotic Chinese. They are very proud to say, so what's wrong? In 1950, we conquered Tibet fair and square, and everybody conquers everybody else, okay? I mean, look at what the British did to India, for example. Look at what the Europeans did to the whole American continent. And the truth is, well, you could do that, okay? But that was 300 years ago, but you can't do that after 1918. It's very much like as a Chinese over here, I can tell people that you know, my great-grandfather, he had 4 wives or 5 concubines, okay? But if I tell somebody that I have 4 wives and 5 concubines today, I'll be in trouble because no, not today. So that's basically the reason why the PRC has to claim that Tibet was already part of China before the, what you call, liberation or invasion of Tibet in 1950. So, but what is antiquity, by the way? Okay, China says Tibet has been part of China since antiquity. What on earth do you mean by antiquity? Well, they used to say that it's since Tang Dynasty, which is about 7th century, okay? All people like us, we are brought up to know the story of Wencheng Gongzu, okay? The Princess Wencheng and blah, 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 and so forth. Now, eventually, even the Chinese communists themselves, they realized that this is a little bit ridiculous, okay? So they actually, they revised it. So the most current version, the claim of the PRC is that Tibet became part of China since the Yuan Dynasty. They move it forward by about 700 years, by the way, from the 7th century to about the 12th century. So, since the PRC says that Tibet became part of China since the Yuan Dynasty, so what I am doing is to look at, starting from Yuan Dynasty, is that to look at the Chinese official records and to see whether they show that Tibet was indeed part of China during the Yuan, which is, of course, since Yuan Dynasty, right? So it's the Yuan Dynasty, the Ming Dynasty, Qing Dynasty, and the Republic of China. Now, after 1949, there's nothing to talk about. Tibet, in fact, became part of China, okay? The question, of course, was it invaded, was it occupied, or was it united? Well, that's a question, but there's no point talking about anything after 1949. So I limit myself only to the history over here. Now, so for those of you who are not very familiar with Chinese history, please just remember these few names: Yuan, Ming, Qing, and the Republic of China. And then today we'll talk about Ming, and then tomorrow we'll talk about Qing. And these are the 2 most important dynasties when it comes to whether Tibet was part of China. Incidentally, today when I talk about Tibet, I imply what's today called the Tibet Autonomous Region. We are not talking about the more murky issues that involve the Tibetan regions in Qinghai, and Sichuan, and Yunnan, and Gansu, and so forth, okay? And that is the limitation that I impose on myself so that I can focus on my research, okay? Because the issues of all these different polities outside what is today the Tibet Autonomous Region is a lot more complicated, okay? So, I think given the audience, I can skip that. I think everybody over here knows about the recent history about what happened in 1950 and the years before that. So I'm going to skip that part. And then, okay, so I have, this is the scope and objectives, and I have just completed this part, the importance of the topic. So the next thing that I'm going to go over will be the initial motivation, and then about the guiding principles of my research. So let's look at the initial motivation. Those of you who can read Chinese, this is Chinese submission to the Imperial Court, and there are 3 of you who can read that, and I'm going to ask you what dynasty or what era is it from, which emperor is it from? Okay, for the benefit of those who can read Chinese, 世德35年12月21日，清奉御准，承范圣爵，充为钦差正使，陈阮述充为钦差副使。Do you know which dynasty that's from? Guess? It's Qing. I cheated you. Okay? I misled you. This is not a Chinese document. This is from Vietnam. Okay? And this is year 1883. This is year 1883 after Vietnam became a protectorate of France. After China fought with France, and again, who won and who lost depends on which side of the story you're reading about, but the end result is that Vietnam became a protectorate of France. They were still using fully Chinese script. I have asked Chinese, and no Chinese had ever detected that this is a non-Chinese document. My point is that there are countries in surrounding China, they were using Chinese, okay, as their official language as a scholastic language for centuries, okay, you cannot tell the difference. You cannot tell the difference between a Chinese document and basically a Vietnamese document because they use the same language. Okay? So this is 1883, okay? And this, of course, is a photocopy of a real document that's preserved in Vietnam right now, by the way. Okay? And this is 1884, okay, same thing. Okay? So my point is this, actually. Again, I'm going to ask for the help of those of you who can read Chinese. Okay? You look at Chinese language. You look at Japan. This is Japan. The difference between human beings and animals, the biggest difference is that we have written language. Because animals have spoken language too. The whales and the elephants, okay, they talk among themselves. Okay? The Chinese, the human beings, the civilized human beings, we have written language. And the most important part of your written language is one, how you identify yourself. What do you call yourself? Okay? And if you look at Japan, okay, I don't know whether you realize that Japan, Nippon, okay, means the place where the sun rises, okay? It sounds very, very gorgeous. It sounds very impressive. But if you think about it, the place where the sun rises is east. East where the sun rises is east to the center of China. The very name Nippon, Japan, okay, betrays this recognition that the center is China, okay? And you look at the names for the Ministry of Education, the Bank of Japan, Nippon, all Nippon Airlines, all these things, they're exactly like Chinese words. In fact, okay, the meaning is the same, the writing is the same, everything is the same. If you look at Vietnam, okay, it actually, Vietnam means the south. In the Vietnamese language and the Chinese language, it means the south of the Viet part of China, and the Yue part is actually today's Guangdong, which is the province where my ancestors come from. In other words, Vietnam, in brief, means the south of China. Okay? And actually, the original name of Vietnam is actually called An Nan, which is peace at the south. So these are examples of countries where no doubt they have this very, very close linkage or lineage, okay, with China. But if you look at Japan, Japan wanted to become the brothers of the Chinese during the Second World War, okay, and the Chinese, of course, got very mad. See, who wants to be your brother? Okay, you murdered so many of my brothers and sisters and confederates, and I'm not your brother, okay? So the Chinese don't want these people as their brothers. On the other hand, Chinese wouldn't dare to call Vietnam as the sort of the, whatever, the past protectorate. But the relationship is obvious, okay? You look at the Germanic countries, for example, okay, the Netherlands, Holland, okay, they call themselves, this is the name they call themselves, Nederland, okay? And actually the German word is Nederlande, okay? And the only difference, really, is that there's an I over here and the E over here, and Nederlande in Germany, in German, means lowlands, okay? The Netherlands is the lowlands compared, or with reference to the main part of Germany. Österreich, Austria, their own name, Austria is the English name, but they call themselves, the Austrians call them Österreich, and in Germany it means, in German it means the Eastern Kingdom, okay? Austria is east of Germany. Denmark, actually their own name is called Danmark, and Mark, the word Mark is actually borderland in German, and so Denmark actually means that our country is the borderland country of Germany. So it all betrays, again, the fact that they were all actually one culture and one country. But remember, when Hitler tried to unite these countries into one big Aryan nation, Hitler was considered as a real crook and devil, right? Okay, you look at this thing, okay? This is what the Tibetans call themselves, okay? And the Chinese, we joke about the fact that these Western lettering, okay, the English alphabets, they look like earthworms. But you look at that, my goodness, it doesn't look like earthworms, it doesn't look like beetles, I don't know what they look like. Okay? Most Chinese don't even know a single letter of the Tibetan language, let alone a single word. So if you have these people that cannot be considered as the brothers of Chinese, if you look at these people that shouldn't be united in one country, well, I mean, somebody with this kind of of a name for themselves, okay, which is just totally unrelated to the Chinese language, then how could they have been part of China since antiquity? You need to explain it. If this were true, is that how come they could preserve something like that for, the past 1,000 years or whatever as the case may be? So that's actually one of the motivation of trying to find out, why. Okay, so right now let's come back to the main question, and that is, was Tibet part of China during the Ming Dynasty or the Qing Dynasty, as the case may be? Here, let's start with something simple. Suppose if you want to find out my nationality, you ask me, okay? Why don't you just ask me, what's your nationality? And if I say, I'm an American, that answers the question. However, suppose you have reason to doubt my honesty, and you want me to prove that I'm an American, what would be the most straightforward proof? Very good, a passport, right? Take my passport. Now, if I show you my driving license, well, it's 50%. If I show you my college diploma, well, if I show you a picture I've taken with Donald Trump, hey, I've taken a picture with Donald Trump, that proves I'm American. You know immediately that I am a con man, right? Right? Okay, so the same thing over here. Was Tibet part of China in, let's say, any year, any dynasty? How do we prove it? What just like, American means a passport, right? Okay, and a photo with Donald Trump doesn't count. How would we prove or disprove that Tibet was or wasn't part of China? What criteria would come to mind? When you rule a place, when you conquer a place, what was the main reason for doing that? What? Culture? We are too high class. If you look at people like Genghis Khan, the Manchurians, or most people, or even Hitler, I don't think they did any conquering because of culture. Well, Hitler ended up looting a lot of paintings. Okay, that's for sure. Exploitation, and what's the most standard form of exploitation? Taxes. That's right? First thing is that, did you collect tax in that place? Were you able to collect tax? But there's actually one thing that goes before collecting tax. You know what that is? How could you collect tax? What makes it possible? You need the tax rolls, right? You need census records, okay? And how many of you celebrate Christmas? Most of you are not Christians, but do you know about the Christmas story? Yeah, why was Jesus born in Bethlehem? I use this example not for Indians, but for when I give the speech to the Westerners. But really, the Westerners would know very well. Jesus was born in Bethlehem because his father was asked to report to his hometown, because at that time the Roman emperor ordered all the subjects, okay, to be counted, okay, in their own hometowns. But that's true in China, in every place, all the empires, okay, the first thing to do is to have a census, and then based on the tax rolls, they started collecting money from you, okay? So, but there are many other criteria, okay? So let's look at some of the criteria. So this will be an example, right? The first one would be like the American question. Why do you just ask me, what is my nationality? And if I tell you that I'm American, then probably I am. On the other hand, if I tell that I'm not American, then probably I'm not, okay? This is what you call the self-declaration criterion, and that is, how do I call myself? Do I call myself an American, or do I call myself a Canadian, okay? Then that's how the Chinese government, they have labeled themselves, okay, and how they have labeled Tibet, okay? And then the second one would be census and residency registration, which is the criterion that I've just mentioned, and then taxation, tributes, okay? And then a whole bunch of other things, for example. Did you send judges there? Do they follow the same laws? And then, of course, do they use the same languages and so forth? Now, among those criteria, if you dissatisfied or not satisfy any of those, that doesn't conclusively prove that you are or you're not part of China. On the other hand, if you have a region that didn't satisfy any of these criteria, then it's pretty clear that place wasn't part of China. And actually, what I have found, of course, is that in those dynasties, okay, Yuan, Ming, Qing, and the Republic of China, Tibet satisfied none of these. And you'll be surprised, okay, when you look at the old records, because the tributes actually is one thing that the PRC sort of brags about all the time. And we'll actually see what tributes mean in the old records. So anyway, we'll then also look at individual events and to examine whether China had any sort of real influence over Tibet. So the second guiding principle that I use in my research, okay, remember the first guiding principle is I use reasonable criteria, okay? In other words, do you have text rows? Do you have languages? Do you collect texts and so forth? The second one is this. I take 100% Chinese chauvinistic approach in my research. In other words, my approach is that why should I listen to the Tibetans? Why should I listen to the Indians or the British for that matter? Okay, they all write this nonsense about Tibet anyway. So I only look at documents that are written in the Chinese language, Hanyu, okay, by Chinese as defined by the PRC, which includes, of course, not only the Hans, but the Manchurians and, of course, some of the Mongolian officers in the Yuan court. Okay? As you know, the Qing dynasty was basically a Manchurian dynasty, and then, of course, the Yuan dynasty was the Mongolian dynasty. Okay? And then on top of that, not only that they have been written by Chinese, they were published in China sometime between the beginning of the Yuan dynasty, which is 1279, and the beginning of the PRC, it's 1949. In other words, we're going to say, okay, I'm going to not listen to what the Chinese communists have to say, but I'm going to listen to what all the Chinese that preceded the Chinese communists, what they say. So it'll be between 1279 and 1948. It's just been published, open for inspection. Overwhelming majority of these documents have been republished and reprinted by the PRC after 1949. In other words, these are documents that have been written by the Chinese before 1949, but they have been reaffirmed and recognized by the PRC as authoritative. Okay? So I'm looking at these documents, okay, because as I've said, my objective is to try to explain to the Chinese that, hey, according to your own documents, let's see what they say. Okay? Regardless of what the Westerners, the Indians, or the Tibetans, what they say. And then on top of that, of course, to make it easier for you to check the accuracy, the majority of these documents are available for examination via internet websites, either operated by the PRC institutions or approved and supported by the PRC government. So I'm using documents that are not only recognized as valid and authoritative by the PRC, but the addition are also printed by the PRC, okay? So there's no way I can fake it. In other words, it's a simple statement. Don't believe in a single word I say. Check it out. Unfortunately, of course, I'm speaking to an audience where most of you can't read Chinese, so you can't accept my challenge. But when I make a presentation in Chinese, I always say, check out every word I say, okay? In your case, okay, you need to take some Chinese lessons, okay? I'm just joking. The next thing that I'll do is to go through, and this part, please be patient with me because you really need to understand this part in order to go forward. And that you need to know something about what's called Chinese historiography. In other words, what these historical documents are. Okay, why is this important? If you study Pythagoras' theorem when you were in high school, okay, a squared plus b squared plus c squared equals to c squared, and you have other scientific concepts. It's not important to know actually who invented them, okay? So I don't care whether it's Pythagoras or anybody, it could be some Chinese or some Europeans who came up with a squared plus b squared equals to c squared. The source is not important because I can prove it or disprove it as the case may be. I can test it empirically today, okay? Now, history is different. History is that we have to depend on records. Whose records do I believe in? Okay, particularly in the case of Tibet history, because the Tibetan records apparently are different from the Chinese records. Is that true? I don't know. That's what we're going to find out. But the first thing we ask when somebody tells you something about Tibetan Chinese history is that, where do you read it from? Now, if you read it from the PRC's People's Daily, or to before for that matter, if you read it from the Dalai Lama website, it's probably not that, look, let's be very fair about it, right? Let's find something that is sort of neutral, okay? And then we'll then judge and see whether they are accurate. Okay, so I am taking the chauvinistic approach by claiming that the Chinese classical documents are reliable and credible. Now, why am I saying that? Not entirely because I'm chauvinistic, but there's really a reason behind it. China is actually the only old culture that has a system of what you call official history, which is correct history. In Chinese, it's called 正史. First of all, the primary sources. When the emperor gets up and then goes to work, whole imperial court, we have what is called the daily records. Literally in Chinese, qi ji zhu means rising and living records. The moment the emperor rises from the bed, okay, the whole day, everything recorded, including all the imperial court proceedings. And then, please look at this, because this one will be used repeatedly, okay? The importance of this, because these daily records will be kept for the reign of one emperor, and after the death of each emperor, the succeeding emperor, usually the son or the niece or whatever, or the nephew, whatever, will then convene a board and look at all the daily records and then compile the veritable records, 实录 of the emperor. So each emperor, after the death, will have a set of veritable records, okay? And we now actually have a complete set of all the emperors for the Ming and the Qing dynasty. For the Yuan dynasty, we don't have a complete set sort of existing, but Ming and Qing we do have. And then, of course, on top of that, we have other primary sources. We have these reports or submissions from the officials, okay? And then the imperial edicts, and these are all kept, and they are all digitized, and you can all search them from the websites, okay? They are operated by the People's Republic of China. And none of these things can be faked because there are multiple copies of that kept in different libraries on top of the fact that they are available in websites that are searchable. So these are what you call the primary sources, okay? And then that comes a semi-primary source, which comes to the history, official history. This is not official history yet. These are raw material primary sources. And then from these primary sources, we get the semi-primary sources, which is called the official history, or the 24 histories. And they're all together, actually 24, 25, depending on how you count. And goes back, the first one goes back to more than 2,000 years ago, and that is the historical records of the Western Han Dynasty. For our research and for our talks in the next 2 days, we'll be only looking about this, Ming history and Qing history draft. Now, the way these things are compiled is this. Remember, we say, after the death of each emperor, the successor will compile the veritable records. And after the demise of each dynasty, the succeeding dynasty will again convene a board of scholars and then go through all the archival records, and particularly the veritable records, and then compile the official history of the dynasty. So that would mean that the Yuan history was actually compiled after the demise of the Yuan dynasty by the Ming government. And Ming history, of course, is also then compiled after the demise of the Ming dynasty by the Qing emperors. But this is a tradition that has been followed by these Chinese historians, official historians, for 2,000 or 3,000 years. Okay? So it's a very, very formal system of keeping these records. And these people were educated before 1949, which is very important, because after 1949, people are taught that for political reasons, you can say whatever you like, okay, to fit political goals, okay? The Chinese before 1949, they were not taught that way. They were taught that if you're a historian, you stick to the truth, okay, you fight for the truth with your life. And they were actually people known, okay, to have their head chopped off because they refused to obey what the emperors wanted them to write down, okay? So these things, and you see the content later on when I look at these records, you see, my goodness, they have all these dirty linens washed out, okay? If you look at most of these records, okay, of most cultures, is that the kings or the leaders are all saints, they can do no wrong, okay? But if you look at these Chinese officials' histories, okay, they reveal just so much sort of scandals that you will know that they are true, okay, because nobody will make these things up, okay? And you'll see some of the examples afterwards, by the way. And so this is just a listing of the way you can actually go to these sources and read them yourself, if you can read Chinese, and that is. Some of them, they're actually operated jointly by the Chinese government and the American government. Okay, this is called China-American Digital Academic Libraries. Okay, so and then of course these are the important databases. It contains hundreds of thousands of books, classic books that digitized. Now, for background information, for non-controversial information, I'm going to use Baidu again because of my audience. Remember, my target audience is the Chinese. Is that Wikipedia is not available in China. Okay, so in order to convince the Chinese who live in mainland China, because in China instead of Wikipedia, the PRC have Baidu available. Okay, so people read Baidu. Okay, except of course Wikipedia is sort of free. Free not in the sense of the cost, but in terms of freedom of speech. Baidu, of course, is basically, it represents the PRC's point of view, which is good. That's the whole idea, is that we want everything to conform to the PRC's point of view, as that according to what they say, how do we look at Tibet history? So we use Baidu as the authoritative source. Okay? And for background information, actually, it's okay, because for most background information, nobody would lie. Okay. So I'm going to skip through that because, and these are just examples of other sort of a series of books, okay, that would give you access to all the authoritative material and so forth. Okay, so I am done with the first part, which is the first slide being crossed out. So right now we're down to the primary objectives, and the primary objectives would be, the first one would be in red, and that is, was Tibet independent of China during the Ming Dynasty? And we'll look at the first topic in red, and that's how do the Chinese classify Tibet? Okay, and then was Tibet considered as part of China by the Chinese authorities, by the Chinese authorities themselves? So let me repeat the question once more and make sure that everybody understands what I'm trying to say. My question is this. By the self-declaration criterion, in other words, by the criterion of the Chinese calling the Tibet something, okay, how did the PRC claim that Tibet was classified by the Ming region? In other words, we're talking about, let me repeat, okay, this is a little bit confusing. We're asking, was Tibet considered as part of China during the Ming Dynasty? According to whom? According to, number one, the PRC, and number two, according to the Qing Dynasty, and number three, according to the Ming Dynasty. Everybody understands what I'm saying? Let me repeat. Okay, my question is this. Was Tibet part of China? According to whom? According to the PRC. And then, according to the Qing Dynasty, and then according to the Ming Dynasty. Do they agree with each other? In other words, the Ming version, the Qing version, and the PRC version, do they agree with each other, or are they consistent? Everybody understands my question right now? Okay, now see, okay, so this is the PRC version. The most authoritative statement of the PRC's position is given by the Historical Atlas of China, and this is the 8-volume thing, which is a compilation of which was proposed by Chairman Mao Zedong. Okay, and was commissioned by the PRC's Academy of Social Sciences. This is the statement, official. Okay, and if you look at Baidu, so that's the reason why I say I'm going to use Baidu, because this reflects the PRC's position, and this is what the Chinese people in mainland China, that's what they get to read. They go to the computer, they search, they don't get Wikipedia, they get Baidu, and that's what Baidu says. And that is the chief editor, Tan-Chi-Xiang, is one of the leading blah, 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 blah. You can see that, okay? In other words, basically, it's like it's God, okay? The Historical Atlas received the Special Grade Award, is hailed as one of the 2 foundation-laying achievements in the field of history. It's the most important achievement in Chinese historical geography. Tan-Chi-Xiang is a serious and meticulous scholar, blah, 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 and so forth, okay? So, I mean, this is the reference. And again, as I've said, it was commissioned by Chairman Mao. So that is the PRC's position. and that is indeed Tibet was part of Ming China. Okay, this map is the map in for the Ming Dynasty as claimed by the PRC. Okay, so this is a map of China in Ming Dynasty in a book, the most authoritative book published by the PRC. And this is the PRC's position, and that is the white colored stuff, that's not China. All the colored area was part of China. Okay. However, so Xinjiang part, the Mongolian part, was part of China, but not part of the Ming Empire. It was not. Okay. The Ming Empire is the yellow part. The yellow contiguous part is the Ming Empire. So according to the PRC, this was not part of Ming Empire. This was not part of Ming Empire, but this is part of the Ming Empire. Tibet was very clearly part of the Ming Empire. That's a very clear statement. Any question? Incidentally, if you look at the book, it says over here that I've said actually it doesn't give any source. The PRC probably figures that there's no need to give the source because if it's by authority of Mao Zedong and the PRC, you simply take it as it is. Okay. So remember, we're going to look at the other two versions, and there's the next version is the Ming history. Remember, I said about the official history. Okay, remember official history. We are only looking at two official histories: the official history for the Ming Dynasty, which is called the Ming history. And then, of course, Ming history, if you look at Baidu again, you can see it's one of China's official history. It consists of 332 scrolls. Please remember this number, okay? I've used this number several times later on. So remember, there are 332 scrolls. It's a big set of records, okay? Covered. And so I think over here, we are not going to go into details, but basically what I'm telling you is that you can just, now if you have an iPad or whatever, you can go to the internet and you can look at from different sources, okay, the whole book for free. There are websites that are based in mainland China, in Taiwan, and Hong Kong, or even in the United States that will give you this book for free, okay? So you can check it out easily, okay? So this is just an website from the screen from one of the websites, which is called archive.org, that gives you a lot of these texts, okay? In its originality, in its original form, in the photographic image, okay? So nothing can be fake. So for those of you who can read Chinese, again, I invite you to correct me if I'm wrong. You can see that this is a table of content. The table of contents itself has 2 volumes, by the way. Okay? It's a huge book, by the way. This is Yunnan, and in Yunnan, it says very clearly that Burma is part of Yunnan, okay? Laos is part of Yunnan, and this area is the Chiang Mai area of northern Thailand, okay? So it's stated very clearly in the Chinese Ming history official. Now, that's what they claim. Whether you agree with it is a separate issue. I'm not giving any judgment on that, but what I'm telling you is that that's what the Chinese Ming history document claims, okay? Burma, Laos, and okay, the and then over here you have foreign countries. The red circle, that is by the time you get to scroll 320, we have foreign countries, and then we have Korea and so forth, Japan and so forth. And this is by this time it is scroll 320. Remember how many scrolls are there altogether? 332, okay? So, okay. And then over here, down here, by this time, please look at the scroll number. This is 331. And that's where you have the Wu Si Zhang, which is Yu Zhang, Da Bao Fa Wang, Grand Precious Religious King, which is actually the Karmapa, the fourth, okay, actually. Okay? Well, actually, it is the fourth and the fifth and the sixth and the seventh and so forth, okay? And then there are a whole bunch of religious kings and spiritual kings, okay, that have received their appointments, okay, according to the PRC. This is one of the major justification of PRC, okay? The PRC teaches school children that even according to our official history, the Ming history, it was clear that Tibet was part of the Ming Empire because the Ming Empire appointed a commanding officer in Yuzhang, okay? And then, of course, there are other district officers. They're appointed in other parts of the Tibetan region. So it's very, very clearly recorded. Now, this is just a table of content, by the way, okay? We don't have time to look at the text. I'm just showing the table of content. And so most Chinese students, okay, even university students who just believe in what the government, the teacher says, is that, I mean, we have over here students, we have over here professors, okay? How many of you actually go and check the original sources, okay? Most people don't, okay? So, okay. Now, actually, if you go and check the original sources, you can actually, even without checking original sources, I'm really showing you the number over here. This is scroll 331. This is scroll 332. How many scrolls are there altogether? 332, okay? Well, those are the two last ones, okay? It's a little bit weird. Okay, actually, that's the reason why you need to understand, and that's the reason why I spent some time in going through the Chinese historiography. Because if you understand Chinese historiography, you understand that all these official histories through the dynasties, as I've said, for the past 2,500 years, it follows a very strict format. This format was established in the Han Dynasty by the first official history, which is called Historical Records by Sima Qian, okay? I mean, this is a really, really, really very authoritative book in Chinese history. And since then, the format has been followed. And then, first of all, it'll have the first part of the book, okay? Dealing with the annals is just basically the record of every month, every year, what happened. And then after that, it'll have the astronomic, meteorological, and other natural observations, disasters, okay, major earthquakes, and so forth to record those. And then after that, this is the most important part for our talk, okay? And that is in the earlier part of the book, okay? In this case, it's scroll number 40 to 46 out of a total of 332. It'll be the geography section. It records every region of what is considered as China by the Chinese government, okay? So in this particular case, in Ming history, this is 7 scrolls devoted to it, and they're all together 300 pages. It gives you a detailed catalog of every place, and then for every place, it gives you the population figures, the taxation income, and a whole bunch of other things, okay? Famous, scenic, popular scenic areas and stuff like that, okay? And then the regions include Beijing, Nanjing, and then the 13, what they call the Buzheng Shi, which basically are the provinces. And the provinces are, of course, named explicitly, blah, 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 blah. And that is how the Chinese territories are recorded. And then again, consistent with the what I showed you just now, remember in Yunnan, it says very clearly that Burma is under Yunnan and Laos, and then northern Thailand is part of Yunnan. In other words, the Chinese are not being shy over here, okay? If they think that you belong to them, they will put it there, okay? I mean, they're very inclusive when it comes to things like that, okay? Well, for some reason, Tibet is never mentioned, okay? And then, of course, after that, you have a whole bunch of other things that are a lot more important to the empire, like the protocols, the structure of the bureaucracy, economy, taxation, all kinds of things that are worth recording. And then after that, you have, these are borderline, what you call territories, okay? The borderline territories are the ones, that are actually controlled by the ethnic rulers that they don't consider themselves a part of China. But China considers them as part of China, okay? So these are ethnic rulers, and then again, it's stated once more that the ethnic rulers in Burma and Laos and northern Thailand, they're over here. And then relegated to the last few scrolls, you have, first of all, the foreign countries. And the foreign countries, of course, include a whole bunch of countries, Japan, Vietnam, including Holland and Italy, okay? And then after that, then you have the Western lands. And what I showed you, and which is what the PRC government doesn't tell the school children, is that what you see over here when you say, you have a commanding officer. Yeah, there was a commanding officer with the title of commanding officer. But a commanding officer is at the bottom. It is over here. It's over here, okay? After the foreign countries, okay? So they were actually classified as a foreign country. And obviously, that title was just an honorific title. And we'll get into some details afterwards, okay? It's just an honorific title. Even the Chinese government at that time didn't consider those as part of China. So it doesn't even, these people, the Tibetan polities, not only didn't even deserve to be over here, they don't even qualify to be here. They're at the bottom over there. Okay, and I'm going to the next table will expand this. Western lands. Okay, and Tibetan entities are in Western land number 3, which is next to the last scroll, and then so these are actually the polities that are listed in scroll 331, and then you have the whole bunch of, and it includes, among other, Nepal. It also includes this country, okay, which eventually all the Chinese authorities agree there is no such country, okay? It's a fake country, okay? Somebody just came in, imposters claiming themselves to be tributary envoys just to get presents from the emperor. So that's how it was treated, okay? And then, of course, in scroll 332, then you have other Western lands that are listed. Among them are Samarkand, which is in today's Uzbekistan, and then, of course, Medina and Mecca and Saudi Arabia. In other words, according to the Ming history, which is a Chinese official history, Tibet is in the same category as Samarkand and Saudi Arabia, and it's ranked below Holland and Italy. Okay? That's how it's treated. Again, I'm not saying who is right and who is wrong. I'm just presenting to you, that's what the records show. Okay? Now, you might then question me and say, look, remember, this is Ming history, right? Who wrote Ming history? Qing, right? So wait a minute, that's unfair, right? You're saying that the Qing people probably were just trying to discredit the Ming government because they might say, well, actually, or rather you might say, as a patriotic Chinese, you might say that, well, Ming actually had sovereignty or control over Tibet, but the Qing government, because now they have the right to write the history. Remember, there's a famous saying, the victors write history, okay? Then they would want to discredit them, okay? So let's see what the Ming government says then, right? Because this is what the Qing government says in succeeding this heritage, 2,500 years history of heritage of official history. Okay, so this thing, which is called Unification Record, okay, since the 6th century, since the Tang Dynasty, again, there's a tradition for the current Chinese government, current, not the succeeding dynasty anymore. We're talking about the current government compiling a detailed catalog of all the territories of the contemporaneous realm. Okay? So this is not like a next dynasty, it's contemporaneous at that time. So, as I've said, the tradition started in the 6th century. Again, it was followed dynasty after dynasty. And then by the Ming, of course, then they do the same thing for their own. And then, of course, as you can see, this again is according to Baidu. Okay, I'm using the Baidu version, okay, of explaining the importance of this. See, the research that I'm doing in my book, I take great pains in documenting the importance of each book that I use. Because basically it's like, you quote a book, I quote a book. Okay, nowadays, any Tom, Dick, and Harry can publish a book or an article. Okay, and so why should I listen to you? Again, coming back to the same question, why should I listen to you? These books are recognized to be the most authoritative ones by the Chinese, regardless of whether it's a PRC or Taiwan or whatever the case may be. So again, you can see that it will follow the traditional rules of the great Yuan. Yuan is a preceding dynasty, okay? And Yuan follow, of course, again, in the case Tang and Song and the dynasty and so forth. And it was compiled several times, as you can see over here. But the first, because, well, the dynasty, the Ming dynasty, spanned over 267 years. And over 267 years of the territory changes. So they have to revise the catalog, okay? Just like in a company, we have to revise the inventory list, okay? Once every month or so. So over here, we're going to look at the Tianxun edition first, okay? And you can see that the emperor personally wrote a preface and then granted this name of Great Ming Unification Record. And then later on, you have a revised edition, which we'll again take a brief look. So let's see what they say for their own territories, okay? So this is the table that I've constructed to give you a structure. You can see that there are 90 scrolls. Okay, you can see there are 90 scrolls. And incidentally, I don't know what's good, but I actually mail a copy of my PowerPoint slides to Chodot, to you, right? So, feel free to share it. I mean, so you don't have to take pictures. If you want a copy of my PowerPoint slides, okay, you can just ask her for it. Okay? So, I'm sorry, I just didn't occur to me to offer that to see how all these cameras clicking. So again, you start out with your most important area, the capital cities, and then Shuntian would be it's the Hebei province, which is the area surrounding the capital city of Beijing. And then after that, they will, of course, usually start with Hebei, Henan, and then Shanxi, Shandong, and those are the provinces. And later on, they'll go into the little bit more distant provinces like Shanxi, and then Yunnan. Okay, Yunnan usually is a little bit further. And then, of course, after that, again, this is stated once more. Okay, this is now a Ming document. Remember, it's not a Qing document; it's a Ming document. The Ming document says the same thing. Burma, in fact, over here, they are even more forceful than Ming history. Ming history that was compiled by the Qing Dynasty listed those under ethnic rulers. But under the Ming document, they just tell you straight out directly that Burma and Laos, they were part of the Yunnan province. They don't even stress out their ethnic rulers. They just say, well, they're under us, okay? And then after that, you have the most distant province, this. And then after that, actually the term Wai-Yi, again, correct me if I'm wrong, Wai-Yi literally means foreigners, right? You can't be more foreign than a foreigner, okay? So I've changed it to foreign aliens, which I'm not sure whether it's a more polite term. But scroll 89, foreigners, okay? Korea, Manchuria, Japan, and then Tibet is here. In other words, the Ming emperor very clearly labeled the Tibetans as foreigners, okay? After Korea, after Japan, and of course, in that same group, okay, you have foreign aliens, part 1 and part 2, and in part 2, of course, you have altogether 57 other foreign entities. It includes, again, places like Java and Thailand and Vietnam, and then, of course, Saudi Arabia and so forth. So it's very clear that the Ming government didn't consider Tibet as China. It's considered as a foreign entity. So this is the map. This is the modern map over here, and you can see that. You can see that over here. They started out by this area, and they go down to basically to Yunnan and Guizhou. Okay, these are the most distant provinces. Okay? Now, I want to point out one place, and I would like you to memorize it. And this area over here, okay, is called Xingshu Lake. Okay, and this will come up repeatedly. So please remember, position is in current Qinghai's position. Okay, this is Qinghai. This is, of course, Tibet. This is Qinghai, which, of course, the Tibetans would consider as Amdo or part of the Tibetan region. Okay, but the Chinese consider it as, of course, outside the area that was controlled by the Kashab region. Okay, and again, the details would be just too complicated for us to talk about today. But anyway, so please remember. Okay, this is Xining, which is the capital city of Qinghai, which is sort of actually to the eastern end of Qinghai, and then this part over here is Xingshu Lake. Okay, the importance of which will become clear later on. Should I pause for what time should I pause? 5:30. Okay, 5 more minutes. Okay. So, okay, for those of you who can read Chinese, again, I'm just again giving you, a photo image of the catalog. Okay, this is the photo image of the original Ming edition. Okay, this is a Ming book. Okay, published, printed during the Ming Dynasty, which is kept in the National Central Library, and it has 5,600 pages. So it's a very comprehensive catalog of all the areas of China. And then over here, that's northern Thailand. And then over here, in 1809, you have foreigners, and then you have Korea, and then you have Japan, and then you have Tibet over here, which is circle. And then in 90, you have Vietnam, you have Siam, which is Thailand. And then you have these places with Java and Malacca, and then a whole bunch of. This one is particularly interesting. This term, Foling, is used to refer to the area that corresponds to today's Turkey. In even older books, that term was used to refer to the Eastern Roman Empire. Okay? So those in the same category with Tibet, which are the foreign foreigners. And then, of course, that's Mecca, and then that's Medina, Saudi Arabia. Okay. This is the Imperial Preface. Okay, Emperor Yingzong wrote the preface for this book, and it says blah, blah, blah this, and I know most of you cannot read it, so the translation over here. Since ancient times, blah, 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 and so forth, okay, we have a mandate to rule heaven and earth and the whole world, blah, 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 and so forth. And then it says over here, our territory is truly vast, okay? Eastward, it reaches the end of Liao. Westward, it reaches the sand dunes. Southward, it reaches the ocean. Lands in all directions throughout the world. They come to court to pay their respect. Okay? Just brag about it, okay? But seriously, okay? First of all, the sand dunes are over here. In Chinese terms, the sand dunes are over here. In other words, this preface states very clearly that our country is so large that our western end reaches here. So even in bragging, all he's saying is that it reaches here, which of course is it's about the eastern boundary of today's Tibet autonomous region. Okay, that's when the emperor is bragging, by the way. So that's the sand dunes. Okay, but let's see further. He went on to say in his preface, remember, this is the Imperial Preface. The emperor is saying this, okay? As for governing within our own national boundaries, in other words, after you brag, okay, this is a very serious document. It's not for bragging, it's serious cataloging. So let's down to reality over here. As for governing within our own boundaries, there are the capital cities and the world, our Chinese world, the real Chinese world, which of course is relevant, is divided into 13 provinces, namely Shanxi, Shandong, blah, 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 blah. And again, Tibet is never mentioned, okay? And of course, also recorded that the aliens from all directions to whom we confer official titles. So that's an important part. Is that basically the emperor says, is that let's be serious about it, okay? The places where we actually govern are these, but these are places that we give our titles, okay? We give our titles to Japan and then to the Tibetans and there's a whole bunch of other people, okay? And so that's what it means. Okay. And then after the preface, there's this map. Now, you should have a copy of that map. Everybody should have a copy of that map, right? Okay, so if you look at this copy of the map, okay, it's in graphical form. Actually, remember, there are 5,600 pages to this book, and there's no way we can look at this 5,600 pages. So you don't have a copy. You want to, but you can look at that. You look at that. So this is the schematic map of the so-called world. Okay, and that is this 1461 edition. And again, what you see over here is this. This is the capital city. This is Nanjing. This is Sichuan. And this is Gansu. Okay? And in all these places, you can see there are black background, white lettering, and frame. This, of course, is a little bit clearer. Jingshi, okay, capital city. Black background, white lettering, frame. Okay? You look at, this is Korea. You look at this is Japan. Japan is white background, black lettering, not frame. Okay? The difference is very clear. Everybody sees that? And then you look at this. This is black lettering, white background, and frame. In other words, Tibet, the treatment, diagrammatically speaking, is exactly the same as Japan. It's the same as Vietnam, and it's just the opposite of the interior areas. In other words, the contrast is literally in black and white. It's very clear, okay, as to whether Tibet was considered as part of the Ming Empire by the Ming Emperor and by his governmental officials. So now it's 5:30. Maybe let me finish this part, and then we can take a right? So the implications. The book that we have just looked at, it conforms to a centuries old, actually it's millennium old, okay? It's millenniums old tradition of the central government compiling a detailed record, a catalog of all the contemporaneous components of China's territory. It's commissioned directly by the Ming Emperor. It's jointly compiled and submitted to the Emperor by several dozens of senior court scholars. If you look at the book, and again, I say this book can be downloaded for free from the internet. You can see that there are altogether 56 scholars with the names on it. Okay, each one put the name on it. I am one of the board, a member of the board of authors. Okay, at the beginning of the book, and then of course the emperor personally approves it and write a preface. And not only Tibet is excluded from the China section, it's labeled as a foreign entity and grouped with many other equally foreign entities. Okay, and then of course then we see the map over there where you have the black and white contrast. So it's difficult for me to imagine the more explicit and authoritative proof that the Tibet was not perceived as part of the Ming Empire. However, that doesn't mean that I have proven that Tibet was not part of the Ming Empire, because if you are patriotic Chinese, what you would argue is that, well, that's because the Ming Emperor and his office were just a bunch of separatists and splitters. Okay? I mean, they're just as bad as the Dalai Lama. So, I mean, they're just wrong. Okay? So you can conclude either way you want. All I do is just to present the historical documents, and then you can make the subjective interpretation yourself. Before I continue, let's have a break. Thank you very much. Thank you. Pan?
Are you taking questions?
Yeah. Any questions?
20 minutes.
Yeah. 20 minutes. Good. Are there any questions? No questions?
Have you kind of changed people's perceptions after giving this talk? Chinese.
Pardon?
Have you changed perception of other Chinese people? Have you convinced them, since you lecture to all kinds of Chinese from different backgrounds?
I never know, because no Chinese will tell me honestly. My guess is that these things, I mean, it's the same with you. It's the same with all of us. Something that you were taught. I mean, this could be religion, this could be politics, okay? I don't care whether you're Hindu or Christian or Muslim, whatever. You were taught certain things, okay? And people all of a sudden tell you that. It's like, okay, somebody always... Let me tell a story, about the Argentina story, about how the kids lost their own parents because they're adopted by the right-wing military leaders. Okay, I'll tell the story very briefly, okay? These revolutionaries or rebels, depending on which side you're on, their kids, okay, were adopted by the military officers of the Argentina government. And these are the military officers that actually killed their parents. Okay? They killed their parents, adopted the children. Okay? These children were brought up, okay, as children of these military officers. And then when the military government was toppled, okay, people were telling these children, your parents are actually the murderers of your real parents. What do you expect the kids? The kids will, boom, how dare you say that? Okay, they'll never believe that. Okay, so I have half an hour, 1 hour to convince somebody. How can I do that? I hope that the Chinese, when they hear me, that's the reason I stress on the sources and also the authoritativeness of each publication. And I simply hope that some of them will go and find out. And if they refuse to find out, there's something to do about it. Okay. Yes?
Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. But sir, I was wondering about, if there is any other version of the same history, let's say in oral history or the subaltern history.
I'm sorry, say that once more, please.
The oral history, yeah, or subaltern history.
Yeah.
So is the perception the same or is it different? Because in the documentation, we all know that facts can be distorted.
Oh yeah, of course.
There is so much of coercion going on.
You're absolutely right. So I'm not even presenting facts. I'm not presenting facts. I'm presenting historical records. Then you can interpret the historical facts based on your own conscience. And
so
your own
how do we
judgment.
distinguish between truth and facts then, you see?
Okay.
How do we
cull out
the
This is true
truth?
with any topic, whether you're talking about Tibetan history, or even things like that. Is eating too much meat, having high cholesterol, good or bad for your body? this is an argument I'm sure even in India is very popular. In the United States, it's been raging on for years, okay? Should I eat more beef or less beef? Is cholesterol bad for my health, okay? And then today it's like, is red meat good for my health, bad for my health, okay? You have people selling you all kinds of wonderful vitamin pills and all kinds of, I don't even know names of this, all kinds of health supplements, okay, that will, okay, what are you going to believe, okay? Okay, we have another one that is going on in the United States right now, vaccination, okay? People say that if you vaccinate your children, you are doing something harmful to your children because it costs a lot of illnesses, okay? Would you believe it, okay? I would think that I would believe in the respectable authorities, okay? And in each field, there are respectable authorities and there are quacks in every field, whether you're talking about medicine or history or whatever, okay? Are these authorities always right? No. The cholesterol thing recently, okay, they reversed the judgment, right? They finally now tell people that it's not that too bad. It's not that bad to eat 3 eggs a day. It used to be that don't eat any eggs, okay? It will increase your cholesterol. Now they're saying that, you know, it's safe if you eat 2 eggs a day, okay? And recently they came out with this thing about beef too, okay? So it's the same thing over here. And actually I'll address your issue in greater detail afterwards, okay? But even at this stage, what we're going to say is that these are what is considered as the most authoritative historical documents by the Chinese historians themselves. This is not a Tibetan topic. The Great Ming Unification Record is not a Tibetan document. It's a Chinese document where Tibet is really totally irrelevant. Remember, it's relegated to right there. Okay? And in these documents, okay, when they show something, the question is that, are they more believable than others? It's just like when you have a Harvard Medical School publishing a journal article that says, you know, certain things are harmful, and then you have this person, the salesman, that says, no, actually, the drugs I sell you would be actually better, you know, pay me so many rupees for a pill. Who are you going to believe in? You'll be surprised how many people will choose to believe in the pill salesman. In the United States, they pay hundreds of dollars to pay for all these pills that are totally useless, okay? Can you convince them? No. Okay? So I'm not saying that I can convince people. What I'm trying to remind the Chinese and the Indians and a whole bunch of other people is that these documents exist. Now, I'll actually go one step further because over here I'm talking only about the imperial documents, which, of course, according to Chinese communists, are totally unacceptable because they are these imperial rulers that are dirty and useless and bad and blah. Remember the Cultural Revolution? The children of China were taught that during the Cultural Revolution is that those things are all bad, just like you say, okay? So later on, I'll talk about the scholastic ones, and then I'll talk about the populistic one, and look at how these populist documents, how they depict Tibet, okay? And then we're going to just say that during that time, what do all the publications say about Tibet during that time, okay? Again, that doesn't prove anything. You might say, well, but some of these publications that present a different view, they have just been lost. You see, I can only prove that something exists by showing you something. I can never prove that something doesn't exist. I can show you 100 books, okay, of different nature to show you that it shows that Tibet was never part of China. And then I can then simply claim that I don't think there exists one where it shows Tibet as being part of China. But you can retort by saying, you just didn't find it. I can't prove that something doesn't exist. But actually, I can in this case, because I can always come by saying that if you can find one, it will be very, very convincing. But the Chinese, the PRC, has never produced one. Okay? The PRC, in all its propaganda, has never dared to claim that there's a map, a Ming Dynasty map or geography book that shows that Tibet was part of China. In contrast, you know that two territorial, there are many, of course, but the two most important territorial disputes involving the People's Republic of China. One is Tibet. The other one is the Senkaku Islands, okay, against the Japanese government. You know, it's called, in Chinese, it's called 钓鱼台, okay, 钓鱼列岛, okay. If you look at the Chinese, the PLC, I think the big difference, I want to stress once more, there's a big difference between PLC and Chinese, okay? There are two different things, okay? I mean, PLC and Chinese, they are two separate things. PLC history is one thing, Chinese history is one thing, okay? As you can see over here, you can already see that, okay? If you look at the PRC's approach to the Senkaku Island dispute, they always go back to the maps. They show you maps because the Chinese claim that they have maps to show that Senkaku Islands was depicted to be part of China. But then when they come to the Ming Dynasty issue of Tibet, they never dare to talk about the maps because they know that there's no such thing. So that's the way I can argue that I don't think there's such a counter proof, because if there's one, they would have produced it. But really, the final answer is in the next hour where I'll show you more.
Tibet is Tibet Autonomous Region, I suppose. When you say Tibet Autonomous Region, TAR. But if you take entire Tibet, cultural, linguistic, will the history will be different as you have projected?
I'm sorry. I don't quite understand your question. Linguistic tradition, you mean the linguistic link between the Han Chinese and the Tibetans?
Yes.
Well, I've actually shown you one example. It's the name the Tibetans call themselves, that cockroach or beetle or worm-looking letter, okay? No Chinese will understand a single letter of that, okay? That is actually no link in the most basic sort of, even in naming things, okay? And I can't answer your question within a short period, but my book actually is devoted to that, okay? But this is what I can tell. I think the Tibetans will argue, and I'll agree with Tibetans, okay? There's actually very little commonality between, I shouldn't say that, okay? The more objective we say this is, the amount and level of commonality between the Tibetans and the Han Chinese is much, 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 much lower than the level of commonality between the Chinese and the Japanese, okay? When the Japanese invaded China in 1937, okay, during the Second World War, the Japanese argument was exactly as today's PRC's argument. And that's, we are brothers. I'm here to help you. How dare you bring in those white foreigners like the Americans and the British, okay, to meddle with this, okay? We can cooperate, and we can then make East Asia strong, and then we can kick out these white devils, okay? The Chinese didn't take it that way at all. The Chinese are saying that, who the heck are you? You know, you murdered all my brothers and my friends and whatever, and now you want to tell me that you are my brothers? But as I've said, this is basically, you know, people like me, if you show me a Tibetan script, honestly, I don't know a single letter, okay? I wouldn't know what the heck you're talking about. You show me a typical Japanese article, I can guess what is it about, because I can recognize 40 to 50% of the words. So that's all I can say, is that if you want to talk about cultural linkage, then let's talk about Austria and Germany and Switzerland and the Netherlands, okay? You know about, well, I mean, you all know about the Second World War history, about what the Hitler was saying about, you know, the Aryan race and so forth. Yeah.
I would like you to comment on the concept of expansionism throughout history, whether Ming, Yuan, or other one, and the continuing PRC concept. Because from what you have explained, you know, this is their territories, this is foreign entities, this is, I mean, some kind of a hegemony kind of a concept. Is that what I have understood from your?
No, actually what I've shown is the opposite, is that the Ming government was not expansionist at all. They very clearly state that what we control is the 13 provinces, and these other places are not our territory. They stated very clearly.
But the PRC, in their enthusiasm, unification or reunification or whatever concept they have taken, they have obviously adopted a political approach or a foreign policy which really threatens all the countries around the PRC as it exists now.
I have no comment and I will not comment because my topic is on history, not on what's happening. If you want to talk about what do you think of the PRC, I will plead ignorance, okay? I am just talking about what happened before 1949, okay? And I can tell you, okay, before 1949, the Ming Dynasty was not an expansionist regime. The Yuan Dynasty was very expansionist. They went all the way to near Vienna, okay? They conquered, the Middle Asia and then Poland and so forth. But those are the Mongolians, okay? The Qing Dynasty, and I will show in the Qing Dynasty, they were very expansionist. They were nasty, okay? They were cruel, but those are the Manchurians, okay? The Han Chinese, I'm being chauvinistic, okay? I'm sure you will see, like, this guy is trying to defend his own race, okay? But really, if you look at the Ming Dynasty, what they're saying is that, hey, I don't want you people to be my brothers. I don't think you're good enough, okay? Basically, they have a very superior attitude, okay? They're just simply not interested in having these Tibetans or whatever as part of the country. Now, as for PRC, as I've already said, I only deal with history, okay? What do you think of the PRC, okay? I don't want to say anything, okay? PRC, the idea of communism comes from a Jewish person raised in Germany, okay? And that's a person, even though he's a Jewish person raised in Germany, his school of thought is sort of discarded by both Germany and Israel, okay? You know who I'm talking about, Karl Marx, right? So that is the foundation of the Chinese communist sort of ideology, okay? So what has that to do with China or Chinese culture? It's up to you to think of it. I just think that, well, I mean, if you want to pick up the garbage of this person that was discredited by both Germany and Israel, which is sort of,
I'm afraid I'll have to step in.
Yeah.
We can ask the questions later.
Yeah.
Now it is time to take a break.
Yeah.
And then we can return.
Yeah.
So just, as the chair of this session, Parliament's adjourned. So let us adjourn for 20 minutes and then we return.